We've just had word that there's a brand new arrival. It's just inside this room. So I'm going to go and speak to the new couple and this brand new child. Come on. Hello, how are you? I'm David.
Nice to meet you.
What's your name?
Abel.
Abel.
Yeah.
And you are? Gannett. Beautiful. And this, who's this one? Robel. Look at him. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Abel and Jeanette are immigrants from
Do you mind if I pick him up? You know, most parents believe that if your child works hard enough and stays out of trouble, they'll have a fair chance of success in this country. With the Robel here, will have an equal chance as his white counterpart to succeed in Britain is really what this program's all about. Could he actually dare to be a Prime Minister of this country? What do you think? The place has changed so much since I've been here.
I was brought up here in Birmingham in a place called Small Heath in the 70s.
I sort of grew up in a bit of a bubble, I suppose, here. I didn't really venture out very much, didn't really venture out very far, I didn't really have much money, so it was a case of make your own fun and make your own entertainment. Thanks, bro. There it is. So this is really the house that I kind of grew up in, really. We had two brothers and a sister, and we were very much a working class family. This was very much a working class area. My dad was a lorry driver, and my mother worked as well. I think my father came here in '58, and my mother, I think, came here in '62. And there were lots of adverts and playing across the Caribbean saying, "Come to England, yeah, the streets are paved with gold." The reason why most of first-generation West Indian migrants came here was to get better lives, to improve their family, to make some money, get good jobs.
When the immigrants arrived, many found themselves positioned on the bottom rung of the social ladder, occupying mostly working-class jobs. I was one of the lucky ones. I got a break getting into drama school and then becoming a professional actor, now working in Hollywood. But what are the prospects like for today's generation?
If a young black kid was born here today and grew up here today, what would his chances be of success in modern Britain?
To calculate what the chances actually are of Britain having a black Prime Minister, we've asked statistician Dr. Faiza Shaheen from the Center for Labor and Social Studies to examine the data and come up with an estimate for the probability of exactly that happening. It's always difficult to predict the future, but she'll be feeding in data from a wide range of sources. She'll also be looking at the particular hurdles black people face if they want to make it to the top.
Okay, David, so let's start by looking at the economic circumstances that black children are growing up in Britain today. The last survey of the mass population in the UK was the census in 2011.
And that found that 40% of black people live in social housing.
And that's one indicator of poverty. More recent government statistics have found that as many as 45% of all black children, so African and black Caribbean, are growing up in poverty. That compares to 25% of white children.
Wow. Nearly half of the black children in the country are growing up poor.
Yes.
That's shocking.
The odds from the start are stacked against them.
Yeah, right from the start, literally.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we know that black children are twice as likely to be growing up poor than white children. And on the flip side, white children are 4 times more likely to live in wealthy households than black children. And that disparity has huge consequences because we know that wealthy children overtake poorer children in their development very early on in life. So by the time they start school, the vocabulary of the poorest kids lags more than a year behind that of a wealthy child. And that's why poverty is the biggest determining factor in anyone's life. Those children growing up in poor households are at a disadvantage from day one.
Which obviously has a huge impact because it means they're starting education already a huge step behind their white counterparts, really.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are large numbers of poor white children too, who are just as disadvantaged, if not more so. But for black kids, there are other significant factors that can impact on their early development. Not far from where I grew up, in nearby Edgbaston, there's a nursery which specializes in helping black children in particular take their first few tentative steps in life.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, very well.
Lovely, nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Edgbaston Park Day Nursery.
I love how you say
Liz Kerr is the nursery manager.
We're very happy. We tend to make sure that we're catering for the specific needs of the Black African Caribbean community. A lot of the things that we do here really go towards pushing expectation levels up, a focus really on behaviour and just getting the children really school ready. So the school readiness is a big thing here.
Right.
Having story time.
Story time.
Sorry, preschool, I've got a visitor. Preschool, say hello to David. Beautiful. These are the preschool. Hold on 2 seconds, okay, because I'm just speaking. Okay, I'll talk to you afterwards. So they've had their dinner. Because they're getting school ready, they don't sleep.
Even at this tender age, Liz says that some of these black children have been singled out in mainstream nurseries and labelled as being problematic. And that's why they've come to her.
Describe some of the problems that black parents have had elsewhere that bring them to your nursery.
We have 4 or 5 children who have come from nurseries, mainstream nurseries, where parents have told me that the demographic of the nursery is predominantly white and there have been labels around their particular children. And I think it's more a lack of understanding in the mainstream about how to manage certain behaviours. If it's not something that they perhaps have seen before. When I say behaviour, really what I'm talking about is just personality.
Put your toys down, please.
So if a child with lots of energy in the predominantly white setting might just come across as a child that's problematic.
Problematic, naughty, disruptive, doesn't want to engage in learning. I'm aware that, you know, black children, black boys in particular, are very energetic. And it's important that we don't label those boys who are black as problematic or as having behavioural issues, and we just look at them as children.
It's all right, don't cry.
Knowing that these are just boys who have got a lot of energy, a lot of personality, and we just engage with them appropriately.
Now do some drawing with Tazaya.
Because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, in a sense. If you're always told you are this way, and you're always told you are a problem and you're naughty, you go through life just believing that that is who you are. You know, at a certain point, it's going to come where you're just going to be like, you know what, I'm going to just be that person then.
Yeah, go have a look over that side.
There's been very little research into possible labelling of black children at nurseries. However, some parents who have children here believe it's an issue. Josiah Shaw is a 4-year-old boy who his mum says was treated as being a problematic child by his previous nursery.
Rachel, what have been your experiences in the mainstream, predominantly white nurseries?
It was okay to start with, no problems.
great nursery. I thought it was good, recommended it. Got to about the age of 2, he started biting, you know, just pushing the boundaries, playing up, like kicking, hitting. And I used to say to them, can't you like put him on timeout? Can't you just, you know, talk to him and just know that you can't do that?
No, thank you, don't do that.
They was like, oh, we've got this new policy, we can't put him on a timeout. And I was like, but that's what I do at home. So they'd phone me, Tazaya's being naughty, Tazaya's not being good, he's doing this, he's doing that, not anything else. It was always Tazaya this, Tazaya that, Tazaya, and it was just so awful for me. And it was so stressful, and I just used to cry because I didn't know what else to do.
Rachel says that eventually Tazaya was permanently excluded at just 3 years old.
Was his behaviour quite boisterous at home too?
He's a boisterous child, that's just the way he is. He plays with his dad all the time, and him and his brother, they are boisterous children.
Wait, Tazaya, please.
But he wasn't behaving how it was at nursery at home, because obviously he has boundaries. Nursery didn't give him them kind of boundaries. Some people take it as he's being naughty, he's being out of hand, but that's just him being playful.
Since he's been coming to Edgbaston Day Nursery, Tazaya's behaviour has been transformed.
Hi! Can I have a look? Have you been a good boy?
You know, I'm really inspired by what I've seen here today, particularly talking to Liz. The kids that come here seem to flourish in her school, and that's wonderful. What worries me, though, when you think about it, all the Tazayas that are out there in Britain not getting this tailored care, not getting this kind of cultural understanding, what kind of start in life are they getting? They're being constantly told that they're bad, constantly told that their behaviour is inappropriate, constantly told that they're a problem. What kind of start in life are we giving those children?
If a black person is going to make it to become Prime Minister, it's quite likely they will have come from a disadvantaged inner city area like this. South London's Elephant and Castle. And that presents a challenge to schools like Globe Academy.
Morning, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Headmaster Matt Jones is working hard to give his many black and ethnic minority pupils a fighting chance.
I don't understand. Mrs. said something, I've heard it from there. You can sit down, Thank you. Hurry up.
What are the particular problems that face young black kids at this age at school?
Well, Art Globe Academy is based in South London, Elephant and Castle, which is, you know, in the highest 20% for levels of deprivation. So they've got challenges there and all the social and economic issues around that. We're a very diverse community. 90% of our community is from black or minority ethnic groups, of which 50%-ish are for black Caribbean or black African. I think some of the issues revolve around aspiration and having real positive role models in our community to aspire to and to be like. I think the other issue is obviously some low levels of attainment.
School is two, right? Like two things coming together.
School attainment levels, or exam results, are obviously a key factor in deciding young people's futures.
Mind mapping, listing.
Let's take a look at how well black kids are doing throughout their schooling. Our statistician Pfizer has been looking at pupil test results.
I've been looking at pupil assessment data and breaking it down by ethnicity. In this graph, you can see pupil assessment scores for those aged 7 to 16 years old. White people start at this midpoint and they maintain that level up to the age of 14. Black African and Black Caribbean students start at a lower point. And whilst Black Africans maintain their scores, Black Caribbean performance declines steeply.
My word, look at that. That's pretty stark, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an incredible decline. I mean, it's just, you can't argue with it.
But that's not the end of the story. Between the ages of 14 and 16, black pupils start doing a lot better. Both black Caribbean and black African pupils see a massive increase in their scores. And in fact, by the time they come to do GCSEs, black African pupils surpass white pupils at age 16.
That's extraordinary. I can't quite get my head around that. Why are they suddenly performing better? What's going on there then?
I think it's a puzzle, to be honest.
Research by Professor Simon Burgess from the University of Bristol might provide an answer. He has uncovered evidence of a shocking explanation for the sharp rise in attainment levels when black children get to their GCSEs. He believes it's linked to the fact that those exams are marked by independent examiners.
When we take GCSEs, of course, they're exams that are marked outside of the school. They're not marked by your teacher. So that's your big chance to show how well you can really do in a kind of anonymized context. So we looked at some data comparing the test scores of pupils in England against their teacher assessment. And for some ethnic groups, we found that the teachers systematically underestimated their performance relative to how they did in these remotely marked tests. So that suggests to us there's some stereotyping going on, that teachers have form a view about the likely capabilities of students from kind of outside knowledge, and that informs the expectations that they have of students in the classroom. And the stereotype view might be that black students are not very good in school, and so they tend to underassess them and have lower expectations for their attainment and their progress than perhaps they should. And these stereotypes will interact with the child's motivation, and therefore they're going to try less hard at school.
If Professor Burgess is right, then there's almost an inbuilt prejudice against black kids within the system, where they're being labelled and stereotyped negative. Here at Globe Academy, they're working hard to break those stereotypes and to give their pupils the tools necessary to succeed at university and in the workplace. Perhaps Globe Academy might produce a Prime Minister one day.
So, I've got a business class here. Yeah, let's go and have a look.
Okay.
Best with a team.
Morning, guys. How are we doing?
Morning.
Does anybody recognise this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Marvellous. Marvellous.
Excellent. This is obviously David Harewood, Hollywood actor, and he's working with the BBC, doing a documentary on social mobility. And Miss, what are we doing today?
We're looking at interview practice and how can we really prepare them to go in confidently to these interviews that they're going to kind of carry out after school, to go into workplaces. Would you like to have a go?
Love to. Am I interviewing or being interviewed?
You can be the interviewer.
Oh, okay. Right.
So then down, we'll swap the interview. Can we have Michael George, please?
Can I be Mr. Nasty?
Yes, please do.
Nice to meet you.
Hello. Come in, sit down.
Where they are now is 90% black minority ethnic group. What we're preparing them for is an environment that's totally different, socially, culturally, and in terms of ethnicity.
Tell me about a time in which you were required to produce something to a very, very high standard. And was there a fixed period to this time?
Oh yeah, that's a very good question, first of all. Well, I had to do...
If you're going to access these type of careers in these type of institutions, you have to perform in a certain way and be able to relate to others from a different ethnic group. And some people find that difficult.
Describe a time when effective time management skills were key to success.
Okay, so that's a very good question, once again.
Thank you.
So I think that if I didn't put the time and effort...
Some people don't accept that you have to adapt your behaviour based on your context, and that can be a challenge for young black students growing up in South London.
Yeah, I thought you were very, very confident. Be careful of the repetition of that's a good question, because then it does become just a tad insincere. Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, what's become clear to me today is just how critical the school stage in life is if children from black or mixed ethnicity backgrounds are ever going to progress up the social ladder. What this school is doing is giving these kids a springboard onto, hopefully, brighter and better futures.
But if any one of these black kids is going to make it to Prime Minister, the chances are they'll need to go to a top university. And for that, they'll need good A-level grades. So what are the chances of black pupils getting the required grades? Pfizer has been studying the A-level exam result data.
Okay, David, to get into a top university, you need to get 3 A's or more at A-level.
I'm already out of the equation. I think I've scraped 2, I think, if I can remember.
The chances of a black pupil getting 3 A's is just 4 in 100, or 4%. The chances of a white pupil getting 3 A's at A-level is 10%, 10 in 100, double the chance. But for those who went to private schools, and statistically speaking, they're mostly white, the chance increases dramatically to 28 in 100, or 28%. 28% of those that go to private school will get 3 A's or more at A-level.
That's just stunning. I mean, those people who can afford to send their kids to private school, I mean, they're already a step ahead anyway, aren't they, really? I'm not kind of angry or kind of bashing the system, but these are just facts that just speak for themselves. The system is almost designed to assist those who have an economic advantage.
In fact, David, if you're a state-educated black boy, you're more likely to be excluded from school than to get the 3 A's that you need to get into a top university.
That's staggering, really. And that speaks to expectation, discrimination, stereotype, everything. I mean, you're more likely to be excluded than get 3 A's. It's deeply troubling.
So this is a huge hurdle on that way to being Prime Minister. This one knocks out a lot of black people. There's very few that will jump that hurdle.
Right.
You have to beat these huge odds.
Yeah, huge odds.
So getting into a top university is critical for any black person aiming to make it to become Prime Minister. And there's one university in particular which outshines all the rest when it comes to producing PMs. Every Prime Minister who's won an election since 1937, if they went to university, it was Oxford, including our previous and current Prime Ministers, David Cameron and Theresa May. Today it's Oxford University's Open Day, and I'm meeting young hopeful Aisha Aina, a pupil from a South London state school.
Hello. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Nice to meet you, nice to meet you.
You too.
Shall we go inside?
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Aisha has done really well in her school, making it into their top 10%. And she's predicted to get the 3 A's necessary for entry here. She has her heart set on studying at Oxford.
So of all the universities that you could apply to, why do you particularly want to come to Oxford University?
As everyone knows, Oxford University is one of the best in the world. If I can get the same grades as someone who goes to Eton or Harrow or even any other sort of private college, then I should be able to then apply for that same university. I feel like I deserve that right, and especially because it's not so common within, you know, the urban, like, black
environment.
Yeah. That's what drives me, just wanting to sort of go against the odds and actually help people like me sort of break the mold and, you know, just get up there in life as well, because there isn't any reason why intelligent young black people shouldn't be able to go to one of the best universities in the world. That's how I feel anyway.
A couple of prime ministers up there. Yeah. So Clement Attlee is just on the right, and Wilson is on the left. Yeah.
You know, I'm really impressed with Aisha. What a mature, determined and purposeful young lady. She knows exactly what she wants and how to get there. We need more young people like her.
in more elite places like this if we're ever going to break through the glass ceiling to success. I really hope she gets offered a place. Go on, girl.
Have you got the university prospectus?
No.
Aisha may be hopeful of getting a place at Oxford, but the truth is, being black and state educated, the odds are heavily stacked against her, as Pfizer has been finding out.
Fortunately, the University of Oxford publishes their admissions data and breaks it down by ethnicity. So I've been taking a look at that.
And these are the figures despite big outreach efforts being made by the university to attract black students.
We'd expect to see about 4% of their students being black or black mixed race if it was to be representative of the broader population. But as you can see, they've been below the mark. In 2009, they had a low of 1.5%, and in 2015, that rose to 2.5%. But that's still painfully below the representative target of 4%.
And Oxford's not the worst. Black students are underrepresented in many UK universities. Things are improving, but as recently as 2012, Oxford and Cambridge universities were found to be disproportionately selecting their students from just 3 prestigious private schools and 2 elite sixth form colleges: Eton, Westminster, St Paul's, Peter Symonds College and Hills Road College in Cambridge were getting as many pupils into Oxford and Cambridge as 1,800 state schools and colleges in England combined.
Wow. This is staggering.
Those top schools, like Eton, Westminster, St Paul's, these are amongst the most expensive private schools in the country. Those are clearly fast tracks into Oxford and Cambridge University.
And then onwards into the more top jobs.
Yeah.
And obviously on to being Prime Minister.
And here's another troubling statistic. When black and minority ethnic pupils apply to Oxford or those top universities, they are less likely to get in than their white counterparts, even when they have the same grades.
What? I'm just staggered by that. I mean, that speaks to discrimination, it speaks to prejudice, a complete lack of understanding of the hurdles, of the difficulties that black child has overcome just to make it to that point.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, given the odds they've faced and the odds they've beaten, they'd be more likely to get in because they've shown
tenacity, strength, all of that. They've shown the desire, a strength of personality to overcome all the hurdles that have been thrown at them, and then they're still not being given entrance into that institution. Everyone makes me feel angry because you think, you know, again, it's not that we are less intelligent. It's not that we are less capable. It's the fact that there is a layer, there is a barrier, which is that barrier of discrimination and bias.
Dr. Vicky Bolivar from Durham University carried out the research into Oxford and other top universities' admissions data. She believes it reveals an inherent bias within the university's admissions process.
The disparity in offer rates suggests that black students are being turned away in greater numbers than white students, even when they're very well qualified to enter these universities. Well, I think that unconscious bias is likely to be playing a role here. Unconscious bias describes the stereotypes that exist in our society about different social groups, different genders, different ethnic groups that admission selectors hold, that all of us hold, have the potential to creep into decision-making. It might be that admissions tutors have in the back of their minds negative stereotypes about black students. It might be that they have unconscious thoughts about whether somebody will fit in the environment, which of course Oxford University is quite a white, socially elite environment. These things might be at the back of people's mind, not consciously, but unconsciously.
The effects of unconscious bias are well known and can also have an opposite, positive effect on the chances for white, privately educated, middle-class students.
part of unconscious bias is that we tend to gravitate towards and unconsciously prefer people who are like us. So it's quite possible that to a degree these admissions tutors are recruiting in their own image because they have very positive associations with people who are like them. It's still the case that the vast majority of the tutors are white, middle to upper middle class, British. And so the values that are celebrated there and the cultures that are appreciated there are relatively narrow. And it's harder, I think, for those institutions to value other cultures and other contributions, but clearly they need to do that.
Oxford University's Director of Admissions declined our request to be interviewed for this programme, claiming that the issue of underrepresentation of black and minority ethnic groups at the university is an old and out-of-date story. We tried again. We asked if any representative from the university would come forward to be interviewed to defend the university's record on this matter. We were finally told, we do not think the premise of your programme is strong enough to warrant an institutional response. I think that pretty much speaks for itself.
Someone who was willing to be interviewed was President of Oxford University's African and Caribbean Society, Cameron Alexander.
Where did you grow up?
In Luton. I grew up in Luton, in a state called Tintown.
Is that a kind of working class area? Or?
Yeah, no, very working class, very working class. I'm gonna have to be like vegetarian.
Cameron is now in his third year at Oxford. He went to a state school in his hometown of Luton before winning a scholarship to a prestigious sixth-form boarding school. He's become quite used to being one of the few black people in a white person's world.
So why do you think that black people are underrepresented here at Oxford?
I think it comes down to like a lot of structural factors. I think if you look, the nature of the education that the majority of the black people who might apply or might want to apply are receiving, it isn't necessarily as good, and it's not necessarily as focused on Oxbridge. I think if you look at what Oxbridge are looking for in their students, it's a lot of things that are more easily accessible within public schools. They're looking for kids who have been to like talks, kids who have like engaged with magazines or The Economist or different type of things. Some things are expensive to engage with, you know? Now, if we've got an entirely kind of like monolithic, homogenous professor, you know, then why would they know about the nature of like inner city London or like the nature of estates?
They wouldn't have known half the hurdles.
Exactly, they wouldn't have known the hurdles. They might not necessarily be engaging with, you know, what's hard about your path, and maybe they're just not resonating with that. And I think those things do have an impact.
It's perhaps understandable that a white, middle-class Oxford professor might fail to fully understand the desires and anxieties of inner-city working-class black kids. But Cameron believes the problem is more fundamental than that.
It's not the most damning condemnation ever of Oxford to say, look, Oxford's a racist institution, or Oxford has a cultural preference which is against black people. It's a reality of the situation, you know, it's a reality of the history.
Are you suggesting that Oxford is institutionally racist?
Yeah. I think that's something that we should really just kind of like, just get with and accept and understand and say it's something that, you know, they're working towards, you know, making better. But I think, you know, Britain's institutionally racist. Oxford's institutionally racist. We should engage with it. We should say, look, Oxford carries a bias. Institutionally, it's harder for black people to be here. That's a form of systematic racism. It's an uncomfortable situation, it's an uncomfortable conversation. But we need to embrace that uncomfortable conversation.
You know, I've been on a really incredible journey with this programme, and it's really struck me today that if you were going to design a system that disadvantaged black people at every level, from nursery to schooling to university and on up through the social system, you couldn't actually design it any better. And there seems to be this begrudging reluctance to acknowledge, dismantle, and change that system. Maybe there are certain groups that have a vested interest in keeping it that way.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Great title sequences.
Forces of the United States has launched a series of strikes against terrorist facilities.
Oh, I love this. I love it. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Oh, here we go. Oh, what's this? This guy's really good.
Sergeant Brody called me.
You know, there's nothing I like more than staying in of an evening and catching up on some of my favourite US drama shows. Homeland. What a great show that was.
What is wrong with her?
No, don't.
David?
You know, when I first started working in America, I became acutely aware of just how many great roles there were for black actors in the US. And I realised it was because in American society, black people do actually occupy powerful and influential roles in a way that they just don't here in Britain. It's pretty shameful, really, that we should be still so far behind. And that's not just true in the world of acting. It's the same in many of the UK's top industries and professions. If a black person is going to make it to Prime Minister, the likelihood is they'll need real-world experience in a top profession or industry. So just how many black people are working at the top of our key professions and institutions? How about the judiciary, the people who implement the law? Out of 161 High Court judges, Supreme Court judges, Lords Justices of Appeal, and heads of division, how many of them are black? 0. How about those who lead our armed forces? The people who protect us and under whom our troops serve? Out of 133 generals, admirals, and marshals, how many of them are black? 0. And how about the media? The people who feed us all the news and influence the way we think? How many top national newspaper editors, broadsheet or tabloid, are black? You're getting the picture now, aren't you?
Many people in modern politics come from top jobs in the media or journalism. So I wonder how many black people are working in key positions at our biggest public service broadcaster, for example. Here in the heart of London, where non-whites make up around 40% of the population.
Just touch on that.
As I'm working for them, I thought I'd make good use of my BBC pass and take a look for myself.
This is the BBC newsroom, the hub, the pumping heart of the BBC's rolling 24-hour news operation. It is here where all of the key decisions are made about the editorial and creative content that we see on our BBC news programmes every day, and through whose eyes those stories are told. Let's have a look and see just how many black BBC faces there are busy at work down there. Very, very, very white. Mainly white faces. Very, very, very white. It's a sea of white faces. An ocean of white faces. There's a black face just there. Oh, there's another one. 2. 2 black faces. In a room full of about 300 people. It's hideously white, as the former Director General said a number of years ago. Obviously, not much has changed.
Pat Young is one of the few black people to have made it to the highest echelons of the BBC when he rose to be Chief Creative Officer. He's had a real insider's view of the internal structures and hierarchy.
Yeah, I've just been down to the BBC newsroom and found it to be very white, very middle class. How has the BBC managed to remain such a middle-class white institution?
I don't think it's ever been anything other than a middle-class white institution, by and large. I mean, people often recruit in their own image, and that's part of it. I mean, I remember when I applied to join the BBC News scheme in 1989, and I got the literature, and it said people criticised the BBC and this scheme for being Oxbridge biased, but last year only half of the successful applicants came from Oxford or Cambridge. And I thought, wow, just half of the people in this senior stream went to 1 or 2 universities. You know, so what chance does a comprehensive school guy from a regional university have?
So they're picking from a particular pool of people to...
Absolutely, and you know, what's happened in the BBC's history is 1 or 2 black or Asian people have moved forward, and then one of them leaves and one of them decides to do something else or gets made redundant, and suddenly there's none again. I think the real challenge for the BBC, and in fact all the media organisations, is that they are largely staffed with middle-class graduates who don't have much of an idea about working class life, never mind black life or Asian life.
The BBC announced its new diversity strategy earlier this year, which aims to help black and ethnic minority staff get to those top jobs. It includes a new leadership development program, an assistant commissioner's training scheme, and more interns. Tunde Ogunbesi is the BBC's head of diversity, and he recognises the BBC still has some way to go.
We would like to have a more representative newsroom, yes. I'm not going to look around and have a look, but what I can say, again, is that this new strategy that we've got in place is aimed at helping the BBC reflect and represent the United Kingdom in its workforce. That's what this new strategy is all about. So yes, there are things that we haven't got to where we want to be yet. That's why we've put a strategy in place. We can do better, and we will do better.
Almost every institution and influential profession you look at, black men and women are underrepresented in positions of power and influence. The media, law, the armed services and politics are all top-heavy white, bottom-heavy black institutions. That is a shocking reality of today's Britain.
We're almost there, nearly at the top job. It's been a long and difficult journey, but if a black person were going to make it to the office of Prime Minister, they'd have to get into this place first.
How diverse is that place? How reflective is it of the wider public that it serves? How representative are our representatives?
Let's look at our members of parliament and compare them to the country at large, who they're in parliament to represent. White people make up 87% of the wider population, but white MPs make up 94% of parliament. Non-white people make up 13% of the wider population. However, they only make up 6.3% of MPs in Parliament. And while people of black African or Caribbean heritage make up 4% of the wider population, they only make up 2% of the MPs in Parliament. Out of a total of 650 MPs, just 13 are black or mixed race black. I arranged to have lunch with one of those black MPs, Kate Osamon, a working-class, state-educated black woman. Quite a number of minorities, all wrapped up in one.
I'm looking forward to
spicy food?
I love spicy food.
Well, you'll like this then.
I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Oh, gosh. You've got to make sure you dip it in a bit of the...
Look at that.
It would actually, yeah.
If someone like Kate can make it into Parliament and into the shadow cabinet, then the chances of a black person one day making it to the very top job must be improving.
What was it like for you arriving in Parliament, being surrounded by these very white, very upper-class individuals?
Well, first and foremost, it's not the first time I've met posh people. I've met them before. So I wasn't totally a fish out of water. But, you know, in all seriousness, there are loads of protocols that you have to adhere to, you've got to learn, which I was never taught. So I'm learning how to speak in a language that I don't normally use. I'm learning to always get permission before I speak. I don't come from that. I come from just, you fight your way through. If you've got something to say, just say it.
Right.
Quickly, and get out of the room. But no, in all seriousness, I think that's one of the biggest issues, is that if you're not confident, if you don't think someone wants to hear your voice, then you're not going to ask. You're going to sit back and you're going to be intimidated. Whereas I'm the opposite. I have a story and I want to speak. I want to speak up for all of those people that I grew up with that didn't have anyone speaking for them. I have to push past the poshness, the, you know, upper class, the this, that. Just forget that. They are like me. They do the same things as I do.
What do you think the chances are of Britain having a black Prime Minister?
It's possible, but we do need to have more MPs first for that to happen. So you need more of your critical mass for you to be able to get through. And at this point in time, that's not happened. So we need more MPs that are coming from diverse communities first before we can look at having a black, you know, Prime Minister.
You know, we have an incredible situation in Britain today where it's entirely possible for our politicians, who rely on policy advisors to advise, and civil servants to devise policy, and for journalists to report on them, all to have studied the same courses, the same universities, and quite possibly being taught by the same tutors. The British system is elitist, and it has to change. The question is, how's that change going to happen?
I dipped my own toe into political waters last year when I agreed to front a TV advert designed to encourage black people to vote. It didn't pull its punches.
If you're black or Asian and you're not registered to vote, you're actually taking the colour out of Britain. And quite frankly, that looks ridiculous. Now, I know you don't feel represented by politicians. The thing is, if you're not registered, then they won't ever listen. It's a chicken and egg.
The advert was for campaign group Operation Black Vote. It's led by former Race Equalities and Human Rights Commissioner Simon Woolley.
Hey. Hello, mate. What's up, David? Good to see you, man. You too, how are you? Yeah, really good. Really good.
Along with encouraging black people to use their vote, Operation Black Vote also does what it can to support black candidates and MPs, whatever their political party.
We've been doing some work, so it's a bit of a mess at the moment.
Right.
So,
Simon has been closely studying black politics in the UK for decades. He understands better than most the compromises black politicians need to make in order to get on.
I have honest conversations, because I need to, with politicians from all political parties. And one black MP, who will remain nameless, once said to me, Simon, when I joined the party, there was a real engagement to beat the blackness out of me. That if I was to make progress. And I said to him, what do you mean by that? And they said, look, we know you're black, but we don't want you to talk about it.
Can you say which party it was?
No.
So, for a black candidate, then...
You have to play the game.
You have to play the game.
You have to play the game.
But playing the game, you can't be too black.
You can't be too black.
Because if you are, it frightens the horses. You're not going to get that vote. No. How ready and willing do you think the British public are to elect a black Prime Minister?
I'm an eternal optimist. And I do think with the right character, the right individual, an individual that's smart enough, that the British public could readily vote for a black Prime Minister. And a black Prime Minister that says to the public, look, our diversity is our strength. We embrace that. I mean, I genuinely feel, and I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago, David, that in our lifetime, within the next, I would say, in the next decade, that we will see a black Prime Minister.
So, how important do you think it would therefore be for this potential black Prime Minister?
Yeah.
Not just to win the black vote, but to win the majority white vote?
It's going to take a special individual that is able to speak to the majority, the white majority, if you like, that you have their best interest at heart, that you understand their challenges and concerns, and you as a minority Prime Minister are not going to favour your racial group, that you're able to take everybody along. It's critically important. If they can take their constituencies along with them, then they become the kind of rounded politician that's able to resonate in all these different areas that you need to do if you're going to be Prime Minister. You cannot leave anyone behind.
So, our journey up through the British system, through education, employment, politics, and finally to the office of Prime Minister, is almost at an end. So what is the statistical likelihood of a black person making it through the door of 10 Downing Street? Pfizer has developed her statistical model, which enables her to make a probability calculation.
Okay, David, the calculation is complete. The chances of a black child born today making it up through the British system and to number 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister is just 1 in 17 million.
17 million?
That compares to 1 in 1.4 million for their white counterparts. So a black person is 12 times less likely to make it to number 10 Downing Street as Prime Minister than their white counterparts.
I'm kind of speechless with about that, actually. 12 times less likely. Wow. So what were we saying earlier on about having to work twice as hard? Maybe it's having to work 12 times as hard.
I mean, of course we know that people do beat the odds.
Of course.
But that is a huge odd to beat.
Okay. 1 in 17 million. You know what you got to do?
But David, that isn't the end of the story. For those who are white and born into wealthy households, who go to private school, get into the top universities, onto the top jobs, their chances of becoming Prime Minister are 1 in 200,000.
Hugely small numbers.
In fact, they are 90 times more likely to make it to Prime Minister than a black person.
Huge difference.
Huge difference.
I mean, incredible numbers. Really fundamentally staggering numbers. So what this has clearly demonstrated to me is that the system is structured in such an elitist way that it favours wealth, privilege, over others, particularly people of colour. If you're a state school educated black kid, even if you cross all those hurdles that we've already talked about, the system still inherently is going to disadvantage you.
Yeah.
You would think that they have the more fundamental understanding of the difficulties of life, as opposed to somebody who's really been fed privilege all his life. What does he really understand about life? What does he really know about the struggles of life? How is he then able to walk into number 10 and tell us how to live our lives? It's quite staggering, really.
I refuse to be disheartened. If there's one thing I've learned from my own life, it's that black people can and will, despite the odds, break through those barriers to success. It's a struggle that starts from the day you are born and would appear to remain throughout your life. But the people I've met making this film have given me real optimism that one day, in the not too distant future, we will make it to the very top job.
If a black man or woman is ever going to make it here, they're going to have to make the most extraordinary journey. They will most likely have to overcome the barriers of poverty and the lack of social networks. They will have to fight past the obstacles in our education system and avoid the pitfalls. The chances are they will have to face down discrimination in the workplace and defeat political prejudice in order to rise to the top. Any black individual who can achieve this will need to have a set of superhuman characteristics and qualities and be the most multifaceted and resilient of individuals. And of course, they'll need a healthy dose of luck. That could take a lifetime.